Okay, before we get started, I want to point two things out first on the actual setup that I have over here. The first thing that isn't really shown in the PDF is the fact that you're going to need this battery, okay, and have it hook into this device here. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Also note that the battery that comes with is sometimes not very good, and you might need to get a new 9-volt to run this, okay? And the whole reason we do this is because the board is not quite strong enough to make the motor go, okay? So just a little bit about the battery. The other thing I want to point out is your motor comes with this zip tie on it. Okay, the first time I went through it, first thing I just ripped that thing off, and then what happens is the connections here are pretty fragile. So this is actually serving a purpose. So I would encourage you to leave it on so that you don't lose connections with the motor here. So that zip tie should stay in place. Okay, so with that, let's go and we'll take a look at the wiring diagram in the lower right corner. Okay, so down here you'll see, again, you got the motor. We're using a chip on this one, very similar to the chip we used with the LEDs and the 7-segment display. However, it's different. And again, you'll want to make sure you're using the right one. I talked about that before because there were two that look very similar. So make sure you're using the the L293D. Also, make sure you're putting it in the proper orientation, that it's right side up, or in the orientation as shown here. Okay, so a couple of those ports go to the motor. It doesn't really matter which goes where. It'll just make it go in a different direction, but we'll be able to control the direction anyway. So don't get worried about which of the wires go where, because our wires are black and red, not green and yellow. Uh, so again, we've got grounded out, okay, and then you've got a ground and a 5-volt. Now, notice that again, the board is not supplying the power. This device over here is actually giving the power to the motor, which is, again, that battery is going to give us more power than what the board can to actually run the motor. So you'll want to make sure that you get that plugged in, and we're not powering the motor from the board. We're using that separate external 9-volt battery to do it. What we are controlling with the board are these three things, which basically one turns it on and the other two set the direction, either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on what we got. And that's basically 3, 4, 5. So when we come over and look at the code here, okay, we start with, again, setting our variables for enabling it, basically turning the motor on and off, and then direction A versus direction B. Again, clockwise, counterclockwise, okay? And then we just have a counter setting those variables. Now we go into our void setup, which is right here, where we set those pins 3, 4, and 5 as outputs. Again, 5 is going to control turning it on and off, and 3 and 4 will control the direction that we're going on, okay? Now, the main loop starts here, and it's a very long thing, and I'll go through each kind of section, okay? The first thing we get is right here, this for loop right here, and what it does is it basically, notice, first thing it does is it turns it on and then goes into this for loop, at which point it makes direction A high, direction B low, waits a half a second, and then flips those, makes direction A low and direction B high. So basically, every half second flips this thing back and forth, and it does that 5 times as it goes through this counter for this for loop all the way down to here. Okay, at which point it turns it off, waits 2 seconds, okay, and then basically just turns it on high for 3 seconds in one direction, turns it off for a second, and then goes in the other direction for 3 seconds, right? Notice direction A, direction B are flipped, the low and high here. Okay, so basically spins 3 seconds one direction, waits 3 seconds the other direction, and then waits. Then what it does is it goes through all of these. Now notice the difference. We had been using digital writes up here, but here we're using analog write. And the whole idea is, rather than just top speed, we can control the speed, right? And it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 255. So it'll start out full speed, okay? And then it'll drop down. actually, when it gets down to 50, it doesn't really spin that well at some point, but you'll see it slow down as I show you as it goes through. Every 2 seconds, it slowly ramps down, and then every 2 seconds it ramps up. And again, it's just using the analog right rather than digital right, so I can control basically how much between low and high I want to do. Okay, so with that, okay, I'm going to come over here. Okay, set this guy up. I'm going to push this button to start giving it power, and then I'm going to push this button to start the program over. And remember, you'll see initially, there we go. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so it's going to go back and forth. I don't know. Hopefully you can see that okay. About every half second it pauses. Now it's going to go really fast for 3 seconds, and it'll pause, go the other direction for 3 seconds, and then pause. And now it's going to slowly go down, and this might be tough to see on the screen, but it's slowly losing speed. Again, it gets so low sometimes it doesn't work. Now it's going to start ramping back up. Eventually the speed will get there. Well, that didn't quite work. Now it's back at the beginning, going back and forth. The analog right never quite works as well as I would like it to. So again, high speed for 3 seconds, pause, reverse direction for 3 seconds, and then it's going to pause, and then it's going to again start fast and go slow. Hopefully you can see it a little bit on this. And then it comes to a stop. And I'm gonna stop here. But that's the general idea. Eventually it should ramp back up, but again, it doesn't always work as well as I'd like it to on the. So maybe just sticking with the digital high-low is maybe the best option for a motor like this.